Let's get more on the story and speak to Jamal Abdi, who is Policy Director for the National Iranian-American Council, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Jamal, many thanks for joining us here on TRT World. What do you make of this fact the U.S. Congress has let the 60-day deadline pass? Is this good news for the Iran nuclear deal, do you think?
Well, good news is maybe an overstatement. I think it's the worst has come and not transpired. The fact remains, though, Donald Trump does have the ability to blow this up. And I think what today represents is that even Congress, where you have a majority of lawmakers who voted against the Iran deal when it came up for a vote in 2015, and who have campaigned against the deal, even when given this golden opportunity to kill the deal, those lawmakers, their bluff was sort of called. Congress blinked, and they acknowledged, at least implicitly, that attempting to alter the terms of the deal unilaterally or killing the deal outright is just going to be very bad for U.S. interests. It's not the way things are done. And so at least this first sort of most obtuse way to try to dismantle this deal has not gone as maybe some had planned. This now goes to Trump, and it's up to him now to decide how he's going to proceed.
Well, as you say, it is up to him, and the next deadline is January 13th. What does he do now?
Trying to apply logic to this administration is sometimes kind of a challenge. I think that even Trump on the campaign trail, he was, during the Republican primaries, he was one of the few Republicans running for the presidency who actually sort of bristled at the notion of tearing up the deal. And he related this to sort of contract law and his experience in negotiating contracts. And he talked about how he had absorbed bad contracts. And so you can't really just tear up a contract, but you can find ways to police it and find ways to make it uncomfortable for the other party to remain in the contract. Now, if we're still dealing with that version of Donald Trump, I think the approach that he would take is to try to make the terms of the deal so onerous on Iran that Iran is the party that decides to back out. And the way that happens is that the U.S. essentially makes the situation so untenable for businesses and countries to enter Iran and to invest in Iran and for Iran to see the benefits of this deal. And just by decertifying the deal, Trump has started to do this. Now, if that continues, I think that you're going to see the deal is not actually working inside of Iran, and some may hope that Iran abandons it. That being said, the administration so far has been pretty transparent in now saying they just want to tear the deal up outright. And so what we may see is that come January 13th, Donald Trump decides to not waive the sanctions and to effectively abandon the deal outright. And then it comes down to how relevant is the U.S.? How much can the Europeans and the rest of the world actually salvage this deal? Or does the U.S. actually, by leaving the deal, collapse the entire thing?
You keep second-guessing my questions, Jamal. Why do we care so much about the U.S.'s position here? As you say, the Europeans have been very clear on their position. They don't want to make any changes to the deal. They're worried it could jeopardize it. So why the focus on the U.S.?
Yeah, and I don't want to second guess the question. I was going back and looking at what Donald Trump was saying about the Iran deal back when he was running. And he also talked about the fact you can't just snap back sanctions. By lifting the sanctions, which the U.S. led this effort to ratchet up sanctions on Iran. They were initially U.S.-only sanctions, but then they were expanded to be the U.S. sanctioning its allies and other countries for entering Iran and then getting multilateral sanctions. Now, if the U.S. abandons this deal outright, I think that very few parties will be willing to go along with those sanctions. But because the United States is such a major player, in the banking system, in the global economy, if Trump really decides to put his foot down and risk, a trade war with some of these countries, or really, make good on his threats to sanction European companies if they continue to do business with Iran, then the U.S. would be posing a choice to the rest of the world: either do business with Iran or do business with us, but you can't do both. And so for that reason, the U.S. does have a lot of leverage. Whether it's actually effective I think, is going to be determined by how much will the rest of the world has to maintain this deal. But it certainly is going to put a squeeze on other parties if the U.S. decides to really enforce these sanctions that would come back into force.
Jamal, really interesting to talk to you. Jamal Abdi there for us live from the National Iranian American Council.